Hello and welcome to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. On this Bank Holiday Monday, we will be pouring over the weekend's domestic action and looking back on our club's European exploits. In a little bit, we'll chat to Rachel Graham about Athlone Town's really impressive march to round two of the Women's Champions League qualifiers. Plus, we'll analyse the lie of the land in the SSE Electricity Women's Premier Division. First, though, I'm very happy to be joined by Alan Cawley and Keith Treacy to look back on the action in the Men's Premier Division. And we can't really chat about these games without framing them in the context of what came midweek, namely the European games involving Shells and Pats and Shamrock Rovers. So let's start with Shamrock Rovers, Alan, because they're 10 points clear at the top of the table. Bet Derry City 2-0 yesterday. Rory Gaffney with a couple of goals in Tala. Cruise past St. Joseph's in the Conference League qualifiers. That tie was done and dusted really after the first leg. So Stephen Bradley was able to freshen up his team and keep legs nice and fresh. And this Thursday they travel to Kosovo to take on FC Balkani in the first leg, the third round of the Conference League qualifiers, which will be awkward but looks winnable. So things are looking very rosy for them, Alan.
Yeah, very rosy, Anthony, to be fair. You look at the form that they're in. I think their last 20 games, they've only lost one, and that was I think it was the Monday night game against Bohemians, where, to be fair, Bohemians were absolutely brilliant. Shamrock Rovers never showed up, but bar that, they've been in unbelievable form. And as you says, with the luxury they had during the week of being able to rest players and the squad that they have that can, even they could cater for going 2 games, 3 games in a week. But the fact that they were able to rest players as well in that second leg against St. Joseph's, had them primed and ready to go last night against Derry, and in the second half done the business, obviously with Gaffney getting the 2 goals. They are in unbelievable form, to be fair. As I said, in all competitions the last 20, I think they've won 14 and drawn 5. So I suppose the question has been posed the last 2 or 3 weeks, and we were hoping we may see a title race, but maybe it's been confirmed after this weekend, especially now Derry obviously losing, Bohemians losing on Friday night, and Shamrock Rovers stretching their lead again. So I can't see them being caught, Anthony. And looking ahead to the game against Balkani, I think they're in very good condition. Obviously going into that as well, the Kosovan team will be difficult, as you say, but they finished second in their league last year. I think they were 12 points behind the champion. So very winnable, as you say. I would expect Shamrock Rovers to get through that tie as well. I know it's the harder route for them this year to potentially get to a group stage. And I think even looking at some of the groupings that have come out this morning and for the draw that'll happen later on, I think it might be a tough road for them. But I still think they're well capable of getting to that group stage purely because of the quality that they have and the squad also.
Yeah, and of course, Keith, the managerial experience of being there and done that. That Balkany game, there is a form line. They played Larne last year. Larne bet them on penalties. Shamrock Rovers then went on to beat Larne in the league phase. Now, it will be hot over there, and Tierna Lynch has been speaking about it's not the most welcoming. It'll be hostile, let's just say that, when they go over there this week. But as Alan says, you think they can take care of that and take another step towards returning to the league phase?
Yeah, look, I would echo an awful lot of what Alan has said. I don't think it'll be easy. I think the fact that Shamrock Rovers are away in the first leg does help. I always think as a player, if you know the first leg you're going to suffer, you're just going to run, make it horrible, and bring them back to talent and go and win the game there. I'm not even sure if Stephen Bradley might think, you know what, I think we can go and win the first leg as well, which they're fully capable of doing. It is a little bit of a step into the unknown, the Kosovo team, Balkany. You're not quite sure what we're going to get at them. But as you say, Larne beat them on penalties last year. Sometimes that's a dangerous thinking to think, well, if Larne beat them, they can't be that good. Shamrock Rovers can't go down that route of thinking. Just go out there, suffer out possession. As you say, it's going to be hot over there, but just worry about the second leg, get a draw, even get a win if you can in the first leg. But I expect them to get through. And look, I think we should put massive emphasis on this. And Alan will know, over probably the last 5 years within the League of Ireland, when they've played in Europe, we've thought any win will do, anything here will do us. It's not like that with Shamrock Rovers anymore. There's expectation behind them, and although it is going to be a difficult route, we expect them to get group stage football, and that's a brilliant thing to be able to say for a League of Ireland team. Maybe not so with the other League of Ireland teams, but Shamrock Rovers now, where when you look at Shelbourne playing against Karabag, Shelbourne were looking at Karabag thinking, you're a level above us. I think an awful lot of teams within and around Europe now are looking at Shamrock Rovers thinking, you look the part here. And as I say, being able to rest a couple of players against Derry, yeah, I really do think and they will get through. And already 10 points cleared in the league. You know, it's all looking really, really good for Shamrock Rovers at the minute. And if I'm being totally honest, I only think they're in third or fourth gear. I still think they have 1 or 2 to go.
on that, Alan, because like they've really mastered pacing a league, Shamrock Rovers. They don't panic if they're not playing well in March or April or even May. Stephen Bradley has said that from the start. They seem to be, I mean, have they changed the way they approach these leagues now that they want to peak? They don't want to peak in April. They want to peak in August, September.
Yeah, absolutely. You do, but I think because of maybe the level of competition, I don't think is as good as what maybe it has been over the years. If you look back at the league title races that we had with Dundalk and Cork City for a spell there over 5, 6 years, they were going toe to toe, and there was a major rivalry built up, Anthony. I don't think Shamrock Rovers have had that. And that's not taking anything away from their success. They can only beat what's in front of them. But if you look at the league titles that they've won, they've never really been pushed to the pin of their collar in any of them. And we were hoping Derry might be the team to emerge to do that. But they've always kept Derry even at arm's length. And even last year, when it was the opportunity where you think, okay, someone new was going to win it and someone new did win it in the end, they still nearly won it on the last night, Shamrock Rovers, despite them having an off year, if you like, compared to what they've had in previous years. So I think, I wouldn't say they've been lucky in that regard, but that's just the way it's played out, I suppose, the cycle of where the teams are at. But I don't think they've had any real rivalry. And I'd love to see, with the emergence of Bohemians now, I know they're the rivals in terms of the derby games and all that, which is great. But I'd love to see Bohemians emerge as a major contender to maybe push them. And I think they're building towards that. This is only Alan Reynolds' first full season, if you like, with his own players. And there's the makings of a good team. I know they got beat at the weekend, but I still think they're building and they're very much in their infancy. Whereas, to be fair to Stephen Bradley, they're going now, is it 7, 8, 9 years? And he's built that up over a period of time. And maybe to answer your question, Anthony, yeah, the experience has brought them a level, I suppose, of an understanding that they can maybe time their challenge or whatever. But I just think over the course of the season, and again, to touch on Keith's point, they're never really pushed. I never see them pushed by any team where they're under serious pressure. That night, Bohemians put them under unbelievable pressure, but it was a one-off game. You want to see them being stretched over a course of a season, that teams are really kind of winning game after game, and Shamrock Rovers having to rock up thinking we're under pressure here to get a result. I never really find that in the last kind of 3, 4, 5 years. And again, that's not to take away from them. They've been absolutely brilliant. They can only beat what's put in front of them. And I think their mindset has probably changed as well. And not that they're complacent in the league. You can never be complacent when you're trying to win a league title. But as Keith said, their focus now is very much on Europe, and that's their expectation, because they're thinking we're going to be thereabouts in the league. So we need to be focusing heavily now on when we are challenged in Europe, and they're the games that we will be tested in, that we're pushing for a group stage. And I would agree with Keith in terms of the expectation, especially with the introduction of the Conference League. That's been set up for countries like ours, and Shamrock Rovers, and they're the best team that we have in the country. It's been built for the likes of that, and they should have an expectation, and I'm sure they do. If you were to speak to Stephen Bradley and all the players, they're looking at that Conference League, not looking at Balcani or not looking at St. Joseph's or Gibraltar. They're looking at a group stage and thinking that's where we need to be, and that's where we need to get to. And despite the road being a bit more difficult this year with them, rather than going through the Champions route like they did last year, I still think they're our best chance of getting group stage football.
Let's just touch on Derry. I'll put this to both of you. I'll start with you, Keith. Like, I mean, the accusation, what's going to be levelled at Derry City is that, and it will be levelled at them until they actually start to disprove this. But when they come into games where there's a bit of pressure, when they have an opportunity to turn the screw, over the last couple of years, like they just consistently don't do it. Like, what is it about them? Like, because there's quality there. We've seen that for the last 2, 3 years. But they just, even though they started well actually against Shamrock Rovers yesterday, the second half it just died on the vine. Where are they now? Are they closer or further away than last season? And what do they have to do to mount a serious title challenge?
Are they closer or further away? Honestly, I think they're probably in around the same as where they were last season. A lot of people are saying to me, they're the ones that are going to take the mantle on. They have the players. I'm not so sure they do have the players. I know Liam Boyce and Gavin White and a couple of others have come to the party over the last couple of months. But honestly, I think the player that gets brought up in the opposition dressing room when you're playing against Derry is Michael Duffy. He's the one that people are afraid of. And look, if Michael Duffy scores that goal yesterday against Shamrock Rovers when he hits the post, then possibly something happens in that game. But it's been the sample size we've had over Derry in the last 2 years, possibly more, where we want them to go and really chase down Rovers. They just seem incapable of it. They seem like they lose games they shouldn't lose. They're very, very capable of beating Shamrock Rovers. But in terms of consistency and level of performance week in, week out, it's been a million miles away from that. And look, I don't want to highlight the pitch and the brandy well. I know the Derry players don't particularly like it. I don't think anybody particularly likes it. But they just haven't got the consistency levels there. You look at the talent that they have, they should be able to give us a bit more of a race. But when they play Shamrock Rovers, you just think Shamrock Rovers will just have their number. They will beat them when they need to beat them. They might get turned over by a Bows every now and then. They might even get turned over by a Derry. But when Shamrock Rovers have to win, they will win the game. So I find it very, very difficult to put any sort of weight behind a Derry title race. They could go and match Shamrock Rovers between now and the end of the season, but going beyond them, I really don't see that happening. And the one thing that, we say champions do it. Shamrock Rovers, when they need to win, they win. When Derry need to win, they don't win. And that's the big, big difference between the two teams.
Is it as simple as that, Alan?
I just think Keith touched on the word there, consistency. And when we're talking about, again, going back to my point about Shamrock Rovers have been pushed, you need teams. And if you're going to be pushing a Shamrock Rovers, you want to be going on runs where you're winning 8, 9, 10, 11 matches. Then you can suffer the odd blip. But if you're only winning 2 and 3 and losing 2 and then winning 4 and losing 3, and that's been the case with Derry City. You look at the last 3 games. Now they were tough games, but tough games. You have to win tough games to win the league. They lost last night, obviously, to Shamrock Rovers. They drew Bohemians last week, and they lost to Sligo Rovers the week before. The 4 games before that, Anthony, this is the run. They win the 4 on the bounce, and you're thinking, here we go now. But the 4 games before that, they only drew 2 and lost 2. So there it is in a nutshell. And that's 11 games. That's nearly half the season. So if you're winning 3 and losing 4 and winning 4 and losing 3, you're not going to catch the likes of the Shamrock Rovers. And to be fair to Tiernan Lynch, the one thing I would say is he's obviously new to the job. It's his first year, but there's been a lot of change. He's got rid of some players. He's brought in a lot of new players as well. So maybe they're settling in. I don't know, but I think he walked into a good squad of players as well, Anthony, that I would have expected a bit more of a challenge from what we've seen. The question you asked, Keith, there, are the further away. I would kind of say a little bit, maybe kind of like what Keith said, the arm very much the same, if not even dropped a little bit off where they were last year, because it's 11 points. We're only halfway through the season. Whereas last year, obviously, they were up on challenge, and I felt they should have went on to win the league last year. That was the big one, because you had no Shamrock Rovers really, so that's where they really slipped up. But yeah, it is his first year, but I would have expected a little bit more, and I suppose it just does come back to that consistency. And you're still relying on Michael Duffy. Keith's right; he's the main man. Now, Michael Duffy's one of the best players we've seen in the league over a number of years, but I still think he burdens too much of the responsibility up there for Derry. And a couple of those new signings that have come in, they've done okay, but they haven't really kind of set the world alight. So I think the consistency thing is the big thing for Tiernan Lynch. And again, the pitch thing, I've mentioned it a million times, the pitch thing is a joke as well up there. It's a real problem for them. Even for good footballers like the Derry City lads, I'd say they hate it.
Let's move on then to the reigning champions, Shelbourne. Alan, I'll stay with you just to kind of reflect on the few days they've had. I mean, the second leg against Carabag, Joey O'Brien can't say this, but you do kind of have to just almost write that off. They look like they played it pretty smart. They got through it. It was respectable over there. And then they went and they won an awkward game, at Sligo Rovers. It's not easy going over there. They're playing well. They clicked a little bit in the last few weeks. What do you make of them? I mean, they're in Croatia now this week. Of course, they have the safety nets, the 2 safety nets that you get with coming through that Champions League path. I mean, have you noticed anything different under Joey in terms of what they're doing, how they're setting up, or is the key now just it's a little bit calmer, but it's not radically different? Everybody knows their jobs, and they're just starting to find a couple of results.
Yeah, I'd say that's a better summary, Anthony. That's a little bit calmer, but it's still very much along the same lines of what we'd seen, because obviously Joey was there with all the staff. I do think he's kind of gone a little bit more. You see the emergence of Coote and Harry Wood in the last few games, certainly playing his 2 number 10s. We didn't always see that under Damien Duff as well. So I think he's been a little bit creative. And to be fair to Coote and Wood, I think they've been their best 2 players since Joey has come in that kind. Now, it's only a small sample size of the 4 or 5 games, but I was in Windsor Park the night Coote scored the goal. We were obviously in Talca for the Carabag, or for the first game against Linfield. Harry Wood was the best player on the pitch as well. And I think he's kind of just steady things. Safe pair of hands, Joey, as we know, and he knows all the players. You see even the reaction. I know it's a small thing, but Sean Boyd coming over, hugging him after them scoring the goal the other night. So Joey gets on great with the players. We all know that. And there's still a very good group of players there. Because in an ideal world, we would have still had Damien there with the good group of players still doing their thing. So I don't think a whole lot has changed, to be honest with you, Anthony, but I would kind of agree with your summary that seems to be a little bit more calmer waters. And they've been unbeaten in the games, the 2 league games that Joey has come in, the one, the cup game, and obviously the Linfield games. It was only the Carabag ones that they've lost. And I thought, in fairness to them against Carabag, Keith's right earlier when he said about they were a level above when they played Shelbourne. But in the second half, I thought Shelbourne played really, really well. They were very, very good in the second half, just couldn't score. But I didn't expect them to go through, to be honest with you. If that was Shamrock Rovers, I would have maybe said they had a good chance. And that's where I think the difference is in the league, as we've already highlighted, where Shamrock Rovers are the best team by a country mile. I think this is more Shelbourne's level, Europa League, Conference League, to be honest with you. This will be a tough game against this Croatian team. As we all know, Croatian teams that we've seen over the years, brilliantly technically. I think they have a big budget as well, so you'd expect some very good players. So I think this is going to be a really, really tough game. But as you said, Anthony, they're on the good side of the draw, or the good side of the pathway, if you like, where they do have the safety net dropping down. I still think the likes of Shelbourne, whereas we're expecting Shamrock Rovers to get group stage football, I think Shelbourne's best chance is the Conference League. They're never going to get group stage football through the Europa League. So even though this is a tough game, I can't see them progressing through this, to be honest with you, Anthony.
Yeah, would you go along with that, Keith? Conference League more realistic?
Yeah, I think so. I think we can look at it and think this is the Irish champions. They should do this, but when you zoom out a little bit, Shelbourne are miles ahead of the curve. But Damien Duff goes and wins the league. They get themselves into the Champions League and they drop down. They're probably, people are saying to me, Joey O'Brien, is it massively different? I don't believe it is. I think. But on the same breath, I don't think Damien Duff Shelbourne was a broken team and everything needed to be upended. I just think there was a few little tactical tweaks. I'd love to see Sean Boyd play a little bit more. I love that outball to him when you're under pressure, just giving it up to the big man. I do feel Becco needs help up there at times as well. He can go missing. But Joey's done really, really well. The Sligo game, I actually thought Sligo might be able to turn Shelbourne over because, again, playing in Europe, coming back, this is all new to these Shelbourne players. They haven't been doing this throughout their careers. So the fact that they've able to go away to Carabag, lose the game 1-0, and had that have been the first leg and you're bringing a 1-0 defeat back to Talca, that's more than acceptable. The fact that it's the second leg and it's a 4-0 defeat overall, really, really good professional performance away in Carabag, brilliant performance against Sligo. Restricted Sligo to no shots on target, and with the likes of Owen Elding on the pitch and Fitzgerald, Hakiki, there's some really good attacking players there at Sligo. So yeah, I think it was a really good professional week. But against Recce and during the week, I think they've 7 internationals in their team. I think it might be a bridge too far for Shelbourne, but this is all learning, and as I say, they're ahead of the curve. Sometimes this can feel like a bit of a hindrance. This is a reward for how well they did last season, and they should view it as a reward and take learnings out of the game. I'm sure they took learnings out of the Carabag game, take learnings out of this game, and just go and test yourself against a better opposition. And as I say, I think the word Joey O'Brien uses, go and have a right cut off them. And although I expect Shelbourne to ultimately not win over the 2 legs, don't sit down and just let it happen. Put up a little bit of a fight, represent the League of Ireland with some pride. And as I say, just go and have a swing.
Go and have a swing indeed. And that applies to St. Patrick's Athletic as well, Alan, who probably have the most eye-catching European game against Besiktas. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is the manager there. Stop me if this sounds familiar, any Manchester United fans who might be listening to this. He had a great start. He won 6 out of his first 8 matches there. Bet Fenerbahce in a big derby. And it's started to unravel. Inconsistent, not particularly cohesive. And he's under pressure, Solskjaer. So are they vulnerable? Could we see a shock here? Because, of course, last year St. Pat's kind of took off at this time of the year as well. So sparked by a good European run as well. Are there signs that maybe they could do something very special?
Yeah, I think they can, to be honest with you, Anthony, because you often find in games like this, where obviously we're the underdog going in, players raise their levels going into a game like this, and it will really turn them on. Most European games do, but this will really turn them on playing against the likes of Besiktas with a couple of household names, obviously most notably the manager, but Tammy Abraham as well in the squad. I think Oxlade-Chamberlain, but I don't think he's going to play or he's going to feature. He's still injured, I think. But just with the name and the pedigree that they have, Besiktas, it'll certainly turn them on. And as you say, they're under a little bit of pressure as well coming into the game, whereas St. Pat's, on the other hand, have hopefully turned a little bit of a corner. You point back, Anthony, to this time last year where the European run really kick-started their season, and they went on an unbelievable run towards the end. And they were under a bit of pressure themselves before these European games. Like, I think they were really struggling. Some of the, even the interviews with Stephen Kenny, you could see it was kind of getting a little bit to him. They couldn't score a goal. But all of a sudden, the European games have clicked them into a little bit of gear. I think that was really important that they came back as well from the European game during the week and went to Waterford and got a victory, because you can be distracted by the European games and take your eye off the ball a little bit with the league. And when you look at the position that they're in with Sligo Rovers, I know they got beat at the weekend, but they were beginning to put a run together. Waterford had won a couple of games, and all of a sudden you're thinking Pats might be dragged into a little bit of a scrap here, but they got that win, and it should keep them kind of at arm's length to those bottom teams now, that they can focus on these games. And of course, Stephen Kenny has an unbelievable record in the European games, as we know, so he'll really fancy this as well. There should be a massive crowd in Tala, I would expect also. So I do think they might be able to do something, Anthony, and I'd love to see it. I'm heading to the game. I'm looking forward to it. Besiktas, you look at, obviously, I know we mentioned obviously the pedigree that they have, but to finish fourth, a good kind of 33 points off Galatasaray last year. Like, it's a long way off them, the champions of Turkey. So I do think they might be able to do something, and I'd love to see it, to be honest with you.
Is this, as a player, as good as it gets? Because it's almost like a perfect storm. You're playing a big name. You're the underdogs. There's nothing really expected of you externally, and yet there is a fragility there. There's maybe a chance. Like, surely the St. Pat's lads this week are absolutely licking their lips for this.
I think they'll be licking their lips. So I think they'll also be very realistic in terms of the opposition they're coming up against. I mean, there's a boy there, Rafa Silva, has 25 Portuguese caps. There's João Mario, 56 Portuguese caps. Obviously, Tammy Abraham is a really, really good player. Look, they lost 6-2 to Shakhtar in the last round, so they do concede goals. But look, I think there's levels in this game, and I hate using that phrase, there's levels in this game. Besiktas are a couple of levels above St. Pat's. Is it beyond the realms of possibility that Pats could get something out of the game? No, it's not beyond the realms of possibility, but if Besiktas torn up and you put any sort of performance together and they play to the levels that they can do, then it's going to be a very, very long night for St. Pat's. One caveat that I would be saying in the Pats dressing room is that they played Istanbul last season. You'll have to forgive me pronunciation of this because it's changed probably a million times over the last 18 months. Istanbul, Başakşehir. Well, that's the best one I can do. In and around it. So
about a 7 out of 10, that.
Well, look, that's their reference point from last season, and they were well in that game. So why not go and have a good cut off them? I would be a little bit skeptical in it, and to just put levels on this one. They had a player called Gelson Fernandez that they sold to Spartak Moscow for 20 million. That's the level that this team, the Besiktas, are dealing with. There's not an awful lot of League of Ireland players go for 20 million. So there's big, big levels in it. But again, I don't think you should be sitting there being afraid of it. I'm sure Chris Forrester will be saying, lads, these are in this tournament on merit. We're in this tournament on merit. It's 11 against 11. Go out and enjoy it. And yeah, look, I don't expect Pats to go through, but I also don't expect Pats to lie down. I expect to give them a really good cut off them. And look, if Jake Mulroney can somehow find some sort of form, if Keane Levy, Mason Melia, there is a route to goal there, but they'd have to be so defensively solid, and that's where I think it will let them down. Pats going forward are brilliant, really nice on the eye, but when they lose the ball, even on the weekend, yesterday against Waterford, they gave up a couple of opportunities, and Waterford could have been an awful lot more ruthless. Besiktas will be more ruthless, so even those little half chances you're giving away, you could be, easily find yourself behind in the tie. So I don't expect them to go through, but I don't expect them to make it easy either.
Yeah, it should certainly be a great occasion, regardless. On the sort of occasion, Alan, that I think Drogheda United fans will be looking on enviously. Let's have a chat about them, because it's been a tough month for them. They haven't played a league match. Kevin Doherty brought them to Spain on a training camp, and has, of course, it's stung them that they're missing out on these games. You'd have to feel sorry for them, but a great response from a seriously dogged and organised team to go to Dalymount Park and smash a 1-0 win. The kind of win that's sort of become their trademark under Doherty. They're a hard nut to crack.
Yeah, absolutely, Anthony. Unbelievable result. And I suppose we've been giving Kevin the plaudits now for the last kind of maybe 12 months, really, since the middle of last season. And I'm keeping them in the division. And then, of course, the cup win after he got a few players in that kind of the window during the summer, they really kind of went on a good run. And since then, it hasn't stopped, I think, to be fair to him. It's been unbelievable. And to carry it on into this season, and when you think of the brilliant start they had it this season, and everybody, Anthony, everybody had them tipped to go down. Everybody. So when you think of the start that he had, and then the question that gets posed then after 10, 12 games, can they maintain it? And people were still probably thinking, oh, they can't. Here we are 26 games in and they're still in those European positions. So it's a phenomenal job that Kevin has done. And I heard people even saying at the weekend, I think the phrase was used, puke football. Like, that's absolute nonsense. When you look at the levels in terms of the budget that Kevin is operating off compares to a likes of Bohemian, Shamrock Rovers, whoever. And if you're going away from home against one of those top teams, yeah, you have to sit in. Yeah, you have to be defensive. Keith touched on there about St. Pat's that he worries about them out of possession. So if Kevin is really good in possession, if he's really good defensively when they're out of possession, that's a strength that they have, and that's something that he plays to, which he's fully entitled to do. And to go to the home of the Bohemians in Dalymount Park, and yes, they had all the ball as you would expect, but Kevin, they're quite happy to sit in out of possession. And then when he brought on the two substitutes, causing all sorts of problems, and young Thomas going through an unbelievable goal. A brilliant away performance. If that was a European match, you'd say that's a masterclass in defending, and then obviously going away and nicking the result. So unbelievable result for Kevin. Absolutely brilliant. He keeps producing. As I said, they're fourth in the table now, level on points with Derry. We spoke about Derry and the resources and the budget and what they're working off. And here you have Drogheda, who everybody tipped to go down, on the same level of points as them. So he's doing a phenomenal job. And don't let anybody else tell you that he's not, to be honest with you, Anthony.
They signed smart as well, Keith Drogheda. Don't they? Generally, like, they've lost Douglas James Taylor. This has happened consistently with them the last couple of years, where they lose their most eye-catching players. But the move to full-time football, like, I know that this has been, we've gone over this a few times this year, but they had a habit of giving up late goals, Drogheda, last season. That's been eradicated, and they're starting to score late. Like, I mean, I know it's an obvious thing to say, but they look better prepared, fitter, stronger, and it's really stunted them this year.
Yeah, everything, when a team goes full time, you expect them to be that bit fitter, stop giving away silly late minute goals, start scoring late minute goals. And look, I think it's brilliant. And to go back to Alan, when they're talking about puke football, that's so disrespectful. Like, I've played at the top level, and this is not me trying to big myself. I played in every division in England, and nobody ever sent me down and said, Keith, we need to win, and it has to be pretty. And half of this stuff to me is pretty. When Bulger and Cawley and Quinn are throwing their bodies on the line, and Brennan and blocking stuff and running like their lives depend on it, that to me is pretty football. That's everything. That's heart on your sleeve stuff. So for me, sometimes heart can be over tactics. So much of modern day football is, your coach within an inch of your life. But if you motivate lads to run around and be together and have team spirit and chemistry, Kevin Doherty has shown you what it can do. And I would echo everything that Alan has said. Anybody who tries to detract from this Drogheda team needs to have a real look at themselves, because they've earned the right to play in Europe, winning the FAI Cup. That's been taken away from them off the pitch. It hasn't been a player problem. Then they've gone and lost Douglas James Taylor. They picked themselves up off the canvas so many times. And even I was talking to Kevin Doherty on Friday before the game kicked off, and he said, Keith, I had to go and tell these lads they weren't playing in Europe an hour before we kicked off against Shamrock Rovers. Drogheda took the lead in that game. So if ever you want to see if a group of lads want to play for their manager and want to do things properly, this Drogheda bunch, I'm absolutely in awe of them. I really am. I think they've been outstanding. And if they finish in and around where they are now at the end of the season, I think Kevin Doherty should be given manager of the season. I know Shamrock Rovers and Stephen Bradley will be giving me an earful, but given the resources he has, given the sucker punches they've taken, I think it's been unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable stuff. And Bulger, Cawley, Quinn against Bows were absolutely unbelievable. And as Alan said, if that's an away performance in Europe from an Irish team, everybody's saying what a tactical masterclass. And Alua and Kareem started up front for Drogheda. And the longer the game went on, there was a brilliant pass in the game from Devoy into Tierney. Tierney should have scored. Dennison makes a brilliant save. And the longer the game went on at 0-0, you thought he's going to bring Davis and Thomas on and they're going to get legs up front and they're going to hurt them. And it just developed that way. And I think all the Bohs fans were probably sitting in the stands thinking, if we don't score, Drogheda are going to hurt us. And that's exactly what they did. And look, I think it's brilliant. Sometimes you just need to roll up your sleeves and use a bit of grit. Sometimes at the very, very top level, you can say, tactically, we weren't quite on it. Sometimes just a bit of heart is all you need. And Drogheda have bags and bags of heart. And believe me, I've never played for an Arsenal or a Manchester United or a Man City. I've always played for the underdogs, the Blackburn Rovers and the Burnleys. But it goes so far. You know, it's all relative. Drogheda have a massive success. People are tipping them to go down. They're up the other end of the table, and people now are saying, well, it's not pretty. Why does it have to be pretty? 3 points is 3 points, whether it's ugly or a perceived ugly. I mean, lads running for each other, lads running like their lives depend on it, bodies on the line. That stuff to me is pretty. And if you get that 9 times out of 10 from players, it will go a long, long way. A motivated dressing room is a brilliant place to be. And look, if you ask me now, and it probably goes to show what type of a player I was, if you said, would you rather be in the St. Pat's dressing room or a Drogheda dressing room? I'd rather be in Drogheda's dressing room. They just look like a more together, more cohesive, just motivated group. And like I say, I'm absolutely loving everything I see from them. And anybody who says you wouldn't pay in to see Drogheda, I think they only have a one-track mind of pretty football. Football is a game that can be won a million different ways. It doesn't have to be pretty.
Just because it's been mentioned a couple of times that puke football, that is in reference to Vinny Perth. You're about making Vinny Perth, I think, used that phrase on a Virgin Media Sport as a pundit. Now, he was complimentary as well about Drogheda. I think he did say something like, some people might call this puke football, but I think.
But Anthony, is it not clever football? If Bohs are coming and Alan Reynolds are saying, well, Drogheda are going to try play through the tours, we'll go and nick it really high, just like they did against Shamrock Rovers, the best footballing team in the League of Ireland by an absolute country mile. They go to Dalymount. They couldn't deal with the hustle and bustle of the press. They couldn't deal with the crowd. So why would Drogheda go there and say, do you know what, we'll go down that route? It's nonsensible stuff. And I think for a manager to say, do you know what, let's take their biggest weapon, their press, away from them, it's sensible stuff. So anybody who says you wouldn't pay in or it's puke football, I think they really need to open their eyes, because there's more than one way to win a game of football.
I'm glad as well, Anthony, that Keith has said all that, because people will be saying it's just me sticking up for me mate. But I speak to Kevin all the time. Look, there's a plan in place. Like, that was a well orchestrated plan going to Dalymount the other night. And another thing you have to look at it, Anthony, if people want to think, oh, well, it's puke football and you go there and you get lucky on the night and nick a 1-0 win, they've beaten them 4 times this season. So were they flukes as well, you know, against Bohemians who were given loads of plaudits to, who've been absolutely brilliant in a lot of games also, who've beaten Shamrock Rovers in Bohemia, in Dalymount, and were a better team too and caused all sorts of problems to Shamrock Rovers. So it was well orchestrated. It's a plan. It's a skill to put lads together, as Keith touched on, the motivational side of things. What people don't understand as well, Anthony, is off the back of the European stuff, you could imagine the dejection in that dressing room with the players who, in terms of, would have, like, not household names by any means, but it was a big surprise that they win the cup, and the reward for that is European football, and to have that taken away from them. And we all speak now about the European games, and imagine what it would have meant to some of those Drogheda lads coming up against the likes of a Besiktas or a Karabag or wherever they might have been if they were to get a good lucky draw. And Kevin has had to manage that as well, in terms of stuff that we don't see off the pitch, how dejected they were, and to get them to respond in the right way, in the right manner. And maybe they've used it as fuel as well to set themselves up and say, we're in a position where we can go and qualify for Europe again, and we'll go and do that. And maybe that's what they're working off. I don't know. Maybe that's motivation for them. But certainly, as Keith said, in terms of how unified they are and the unity of that spot, that squad, I think getting Connor Keeley back was a massive thing as well, because he's added so much to them back there, and it suits Connor as well. It may not have, maybe that's why it didn't work at Pats, because they were quite expansive and he would have been left isolated a lot. It suits Connor to be in a team where he has a bit of protection in front of him, obviously. He's controlling kind of the back three there, that big presence. And then he steps out and plays that brilliant pass to Thomas as well. So I think that was a master stroke in getting him back also. Then you lose your main man in terms of your striker, and everybody can get the heads down again. But Kevin signed the lad that played up front, the Lua from Wexford. Anybody could have signed him, Anthony. Anybody in the league could have signed him. And he's getting the best out of him as well up front the other night, as Keith says, runs his guts out for 60 minutes and then he brings on a couple of substitutes and they do the same and have a huge impact. Warren Davis has been absolutely brilliant. He leaves him on the bench and then he brings Warren on, who's been an under-21 international. So he's done a phenomenal job, Kevin. He's done an absolutely unbelievable job. And as I said, I'll shout and roar for him all the time, but I'm glad Keith went on that bit of a shout for him because they'll just say I'm only sticking up for me mate.
Yeah, and I'm sure the vast majority of Drogheda fans would agree with both of you because they're flying, have a great year, Drogheda. Another team that showed plenty of spirit and heart on Friday was Cork City, and they needed a Keith. They needed it down there. That kind of performance, the way they bet Galway, it was a backs to the wall, bodies on the line display, settled by an excellent early goal that they got. Is it too late? I mean, I think they're 8 points behind Sligo now. Are they capable? Do you see any signs that they might actually start to claw that back, or is it just maybe a little too late for them?
In all fairness, I think it's too little, too late. It's brilliant. I'm delighted for Jerry Nash. His first job, his first win. They've obviously come close a couple of times and took some sucker punches in the last few minutes. Fitzpatrick goal was lovely in the opening couple of minutes when he cuts in on his right foot, 25 yards out. It's a brilliant goal. But look, I don't think Cork, I don't think Jerry Nash will care whatsoever about the stats of the game or how the game went. They just wanted the 3 points. They've got that and they're prepared to move on. But when you scratch the surface, Galway were much the better team. They'd more of the ball, they'd more shots, they'd a higher XG. There was huge pressure coming on in the last couple of minutes, but Cork just put bodies in the way. They made sure that they weren't getting at it. And look, at Galway now are starting to look over their shoulders. They're worried about what's coming from behind. But from Cork's point of view, yeah, I still think they will ultimately go down. But it's brilliant that they've started to get the win, and hopefully now they can start getting the fans back on side, because it does seem a little bit fractured at times at Cork. I don't know where the expectation comes from, newly promoted, and I speak to some Corks fans and they're saying maybe we'll get on the back of a European race, and thinking, you've just been promoted, you mad thing. Where are we going to do that? And I think that's the biggest problem for any Cork manager. I spoke to Tim Clancy. He talked about the expectation off the pitch. It's crazy. It's absolutely mental. I get it. Cork are a massive club, huge following, but there's building blocks in football. You don't go from A to Z in one quick season. I know people will say, well, Shelbourne did it pretty quickly. There's always an exception to the rule. But Cork, yeah, for me, Anthony, I think it's too little, too late. Got some really good players, and with the injury to Cathal O'Sullivan as well, it's a hard one to take. But hopefully the young man will come back fitter and stronger, and we'll see Cork back in the league soon.
Yeah, would you agree with that, Alan? Too little, too late for Cork at this stage?
Yeah, I would. I watched the game the week before, actually. They were 2-0 up against Sligo Rovers, and had they got something out of that, and they should have got, like, when you're 2-0 up, you should be picking up the 3 points, Anthony, and then carry that into Galway. You might have thought maybe something might be happening here, but I would agree with Keith. I'm glad for the manager, to be fair, because I'd say it's been a real struggle for him, Anthony, since he's come in, not winning a game. The off-the-field issues, the fans' protests, they're against the owner. There was a whole lot going on, players leaving, players coming in. The lad actually, Dyke Steele, not named in the squad. Then he plays with St. Mirren. Yeah, there was all sorts going on. So I'd say the manager had a lot to deal with. So to get the 3 points the other night, I'd say it was huge relief to him. But yeah, I still can't see them getting out of the mess. 8 points is an awful lot with so few games left. But if it's a thing that obviously they'll get relegated and start afresh with that manager, and maybe, as Keith said, building blocks, trying to build yourself back up again, it might not be the worst thing. And I know that they've flip-flopped in the league the last number of years and that it hasn't worked out like that. But they're not good enough to be in the Premier Division. That's the bottom line, Anthony. So they will be relegated. The biggest worry for me, I would have, is Galway. Galway are in major trouble. Like, to be losing to Cork, you look at their last 6 games as well in the league, they've only drawn 1 point out of 18. Like, that's horrendous form. It really is. And before that, they had won... They were unbeaten in 4, winning 2 and drawn 2. So I don't know what's gone wrong there, to be honest with you. I know they lost the centre forward who was scoring the goals, but that still shouldn't result in these kind of results, as I say, in losing 5 games out of your last 6. Like, that's horrendous form. So they're in a bit of bother, I think, always, to be honest with you, Anthony. You look at Sligo Rovers, I know people were fancying them maybe against Shelbourne because Shelbourne were travelling. So a little bit of a blow for Sligo Rovers losing the game the other night. But they're still only 3 points off Galway. And Sligo Rovers, I know from even being down there, there's a lot of momentum behind them at the moment. They certainly feel as though they've turned a corner. And there's a lot of kind of, as I say, good vibes around the place at the moment. Whereas I'd say there's a dark cloud over Galway at the moment. So I think they're in big bother, Anthony. I really do. And a few weeks ago, I actually said Waterford would be the ones that might get dragged in. I felt Sligo would catch one of them, and I thought it would be Waterford above. But I think it's going to be Galway who are in big bother.
Yeah, their next 2 league games are Shamrock Rovers and Derry City. Although both at Eamon DC Park, but doesn't get any easier for them. It's another staggered league fixture list this week because of the European games. Drogheda are at home to Waterford on Friday night. Derry City are at home to Cork City on Friday. On the Saturday, it's Shells against Bowls at Talca Park, and then on the Sunday, as referenced, Galway are at home to Shamrock Rovers, and St Pat's play Sligo Rovers at Richmond Park on Sunday evening. We're going to leave it there. Thanks very much to Keith and Alan for joining us. We're going to turn our attentions now to the women's game with Rachel Graham. Thanks again, lads, and we'll chat to you next week, hopefully. Okay, we're back and very happy to be joined by Rachel Graham to reflect on the women's domestic lie of the land. But first, we're going to start with Athlone Town, who marched into the second round of the Women's Champions League qualifiers on Saturday with another really impressive win against Agram of Croatia. That came off the back of a comprehensive defeat of Cardiff City the previous Wednesday. And they're into round 2 now. They will go to the Netherlands towards the end of this month to play in the round 2 semi-final. That game will be against Breidablik of Iceland. The winners would play the host team FT20 or Red Star in the final to progress to round 3. So, Rachel, first of all, what did you make of Athlone? Like, to play those 2 games in 3 days in itself is a challenge, but they certainly rose to it and were fully deserving winners, in both games.
Yeah, I think you're right. And look, that's not, a format that we're used to or a schedule that we're used to where you play Wednesday and have to play Saturday. Then again, it's usually 1 game a week. So that in itself was even a challenge. But look, I think overall, it's a brilliant week for Athlone. Their first ever time playing the Champions League. It's, an amazing achievement. And then the first team, I think, in 10 years from the Irish League to progress to the next round. And look, I think Cardiff, I don't think they were a great standard of a team. And look, they were out of season as well, I know. And I think even if they were in season, I still don't think they would have really challenged that long. But like in saying that, it's still, you still have to get the job done. Like you said, it's, their first time playing. You have to deal with the nerves. And look, you can watch all the footage you want on Cardiff and prepare tactically and everything like that. But you still have to deal with the day. It's a long build up to the day. It's nerves. There's going to be a big crowd. You're at home. Like, there's all that side of it as well that, it's not easy to deal with. But look, I thought you were excellent. I thought you were just, really efficient, really professional, got the job done, and not even got the job done. It was done in the first half, and then you're almost kind of preparing for the next game while you're still playing Cardiff. You can start taking players off or bringing younger players on, getting them, experience playing at that level, and experience. There's not a lot of pressure on them going into the game, which is brilliant. And then I think the second game, then I think, look, it was a bit tougher, but I still think Athlone were by far the better team. I think the Croatian team probably only showed a bit more in the second half of what they were capable of. But again, Athlone had the game done at half time pretty much, and they're probably already looking at their next game in that one as well. So I think, as a whole, it's been brilliant for them. Their first ever time, and to win their game so convincingly was, a brilliant achievement. And they have more games now to look forward to, which is exciting. They've represented the league really well. So look, I think really well, for them. I think probably not the greatest standard of opposition, but like I said, you still have to get the job done. And I think Breidablik now will be a much tougher opposition for them.
Yeah, get the job done. They did that emphatically. Now as well as they played and were very, very well prepared for both games. But they did have 2 advantages really in that, first of all, they're in season. Cardiff and Agram are both in their pre-season, and they were on their own patch, which is a big thing, Rachel. They won't have those advantages when they go to the Netherlands to play the Icelandic team in the semis and then potentially 20 or Red Star in the final. We'll talk just a little bit about your own European experience. 2022 with Shells, you were in Slovenia. You got to the final, but were beaten by an Icelandic team, Valor. What's your own memories of that? Like the challenges of making the journey of the 2 games in 3 days, and then how were Valor? What can we possibly expect from Icelandic opposition again when Athlone square up to them later this month?
Yeah, and look, I think sometimes that's what people forget when you do travel abroad. It added like you have to obviously to fly over, a lot of traveling. Like you're not in your right bed, the food is not what you're used to, and something that you probably don't ever really think of, but it does take an effect. And we obviously fell short when we played against Valor, and we had played the Slovenian team probably 3 days before that, and it really took it out of us. We beat them 1-0, but we probably defended for our lives for 85 minutes of the game. We went up 1-0 very early, and then it was back to the wall. So probably didn't really recover in time for the Icelandic team. And, we seen them, they played their first game, and in the gym the next day, it was not a bother to them. And we were all, resting and recovery as much as we could. So there's different levels of that way as well, where it's, professionalism and recovering time and how well they can adapt to that. And I just remember thinking like, and we stayed in the same hotel. It was, the physicality of them. I think their keeper was, she must have been about 6'3", the one they had at the time. This was obviously Valor, a different team, but they're going to be a big kind of strong physical presence around as well. And look, you've seen two of Atlone's goals at the weekend was just putting on top of the keeper because of her lack of height. But I don't think they get away with anything like that now against an Icelandic team. But look, I don't think it's something they can't do or that's beyond them. But I just think it's going to be a much tougher, much more physically demanding team. And look, if they do get through, then it's how do you recover well enough to play another really tough team.
You have made that breakthrough with Raheny back in 2014. Mount United did it in 2011. Can you just tell us a little bit about that time with Raheny and your memories of it? And is it one of those things that maybe you don't understand or can try sort of digest how big the achievement is when you do it? It's only kind of looking back now that you see how tough it is to do that and make it to the last 32 as it was at that time. It was a different structure in the Champions League.
Yeah, so like you said, it was a bit of a different format. We went to, it was Romania at the time, and it was 4 teams in a group, and everyone played each other once. And like we played the Romanian team first, we beat them 3-2, but I think if we played another 100 times, we'd never beat them again. It was, I thought like they hit the post 3 times, crossbar, like Nivri Burke was in goal at the time. She was making unbelievable saves, and we Claire Shine up front who scored 2 like unbelievably individual goals. So we probably got a bit of luck, which is probably what you always need sometimes. And then I think the 2 other teams that we played were below our standards. So we actually qualified after we played the second game. We won the second one. So we knew going into the third one we had qualified. And at the time then it was out of that group into the last 32, and we were one of the unseeded teams, and we drew against Bristol, who at the time were the lowest of the seeded teams we could have possibly gotten. I think when we did come to play them then we realised the difference of standards, the difference of level. It's even the professionalism, they're training probably every day or near enough every day, and we just weren't at that level. And it showed. We played them in Richmond Park, and I think it was 4-0 at the time, and then we went away, and it was a much tighter game, but it was obviously dead and done at that stage. So they made a few changes and didn't go gung ho. But yeah, look, it was obviously a great achievement at the time. It was disappointing for us to go out as we did, losing heavily. But I think when you look back now, it was a great achievement given, I think we're only training 2 times a week at the time. So look, I do give that loan probably a better chance than we had at that stage in the tournament. I think the league has, stepped up in standards since then, and even the fitness levels of players, I think, is a lot better than it was back then. So look, I give them a good chance, but it's going to be a big ask of them.
Yeah, just before we move on and look back on the league games, like, is there anything about that loan that maybe makes them suited to European football? When you look at, say, Maddie Gibson, not just what she can do with the ball, but her delivery from dead balls, other players in that team, there's a lot of pace. The American players and they've got a good goalkeeper. Could they does that help them when you're taking? It's very difficult, I know, to gauge some of these teams that they're playing as well. It's hard to get information on them, but I'm sure they'll be well prepared. But do you think they might just be suited to these continental tests?
Yeah, and I think like we were saying about the Icelandic team, they're usually kind of big, strong, physical, but Athlone are a really fit team as well this year. They've really athletic players in them as well. And I think if you have a good goalkeeper or a good centre forward or a good goal scorer, you'll always have a chance, and they have both of them. And there's some really good midfield players. Like Hannah Waite was excellent in the two games. She kind of just picks up really good positions, breaks up a lot of play, picks up a lot of loose balls. And I seen they made two signings again today. I don't know a whole lot about them, but one has come from the same college as we had Maggie Pearce in, and she's obviously was a really good standard, so you'd expect maybe similar, and then a German girl as well. So look, I would imagine if they're signing them, they're going to be a really good standard and going to add to their squad depth that they have at the moment. So I think, yeah, like the fitness levels they have, the pace, the power, like I think it's going to suit them going into these Icelandic games, and they'll definitely put it up to them. But yeah, it's like you said, it's hard to kind of know. And like I tried to get footage of that Breidablik team online, and there's nothing really. I could just go off their league table. They're top at the moment, and they're not, running away with the league. But if you look at their goal difference compared to the other teams, they're running away in that sense. If they played 11 games, they've conceded 8 goals and scored, I think it was 20, scored 43 goals, which is, way above every other team. So they're obviously good at the back and good going forward. So it's going to be a huge test for them.
For sure. Athlone, of course, are also in a title race with Shelbourne, and while they were in Champions League duty, Shells went and got a good win at Cork City. Rachel, I mean that sent you top on goal difference. So, but it looked like a difficult afternoon at the office. It didn't come easy. They made it hard for you.
Yeah, and look, we knew that going down, they're not going to make anything easy for us, and they, set really deep, set right in, and sometimes it is can be hard to find that first goal, and that proved the case for us. It was hard for us to break them down, but look, we got breakthrough in the first half, and we kind of always say the first goal is the most difficult to get in them kind of games. But look, they went up the other end, and Madam McQuillan made like an unbelievable save to keep us in the game at 1-0. So we knew it wasn't a case of just getting one goal and it's done. We knew we needed to do our defensive duties as well. And in the second half, then they were probably the better team, if we're being honest, and we let a bit of sloppiness kind of creep into our play, and a few bad passes or misplaced passes, and gave them chances. And but look, we held out like we had to defend. We done it well, and then Megan Lynch came on, and she done really well to win a great penalty for us. And then Avian obviously puts away, and I think it was like the 85th minute around then, and that kind of put the game to bed. But it was definitely, it wasn't a comfortable 2-0 away win for us. We really had to work hard for it. And look, we knew going into the game, look, get a win, top of the table, and that's what we want, and that's what we done.
Let's just take a quick look at some of the other games as well. Rachel, Galway drew 1-1 with Peamount United. I think you wanted to touch on Eleanor Ryan Doyle coming back to Peamount. What does she do for them? What's she going to bring to the party? We've seen it before, of course, but it's a good
to
addition.
definitely bring goals anyway. That's what she would have been known for before she went away. When she left in 2021, she went over to England to Birmingham, and most recently was at Durham United or Durham FC. So before she went, she was one of the best players in the league, one of the best goal scorers in the league, and it hasn't taken her long to prove that since she's come back. She got on the score sheet against Galway, put them 1-0 up, was so unlucky not to put them 2-0 up. It was great effort off the post, and it's a brilliant signing for Peamount. I think she'll add a lot of points to them, and Peamount are probably a team that still probably see themselves as should be challenging for titles, and hasn't really gone that way this year. They're 8th at the moment, and look, I think there's a lot of games that are such tight margins, and even the game against us, it was a very late penalty for us to win the game, and that's obviously 3 points dropped. And there's a lot of games like that where you narrowly miss out on points. And I think the likes of Eleanor Ryan Doyle, she's the one that can flip them games where she gets you the point. She's great at getting individual goals, and I think if she had been there from the start of the season, it would have been a different season for Peamount. But look, I think she'll be a huge addition for them. There's still, I think, 10 games to go for Peamount. So I think that she could be a difference of like an extra 10, 12 points in the season. So we'll see now if she's, pushed them on for the second half of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, goals win games. Shamrock Rovers were full of goals last week against Waterford, but came unstuck at Wexford. Just staying on Shamrock Rovers first, Rachel. Obviously Stephanie Zambra had a big impact in her first game as interim manager. A little slip at Wexford, which can happen. They're a good side. But what do you think Stephanie can bring to them, or has brought to them to this point? I mean, she looks the part. You can see that she would. I know you've spoken about this already, but like she commands that respect, and she has a sort of a status and even just a stature on the sideline. Um, would she have learned more from this defeat at the weekend than perhaps she would have from the comfortable win against Waterford, if you know what I mean? Sometimes you just have to go through these little wobbles or setbacks to learn a bit more about your team.
Yeah, I think so. Look, it's obviously great to win. Her first game, she would have been delighted with the win, getting 5 goals, and didn't really care what she learned from that game, I'd imagine. But I think you're right. Look, it's these are the tougher games that you have to learn from, and Wexford, like you said, are a good team. It's not a really bad result going away and losing 2-1 to Wexford. It's a really tough place to go, but. Look, I think, Stephanie as a player was always really professional, really, had a great career for club and country. So she's someone who's really kind of dedicated, her life almost to football. And you'd find that would always transfer then over when someone does become a player or someone does become a coach or manager that, they still have these same standards. And me as a player, if you see that coming from a manager or coach, it breeds then onto the players, and you just kind of, get respect then for your coach or for your manager. And look, I think she'll be the same. I think she was already in there as a player, first of all, so she would have had the respect in that sense. And then to move on from coach, then I think, she had a lot of respect from the players from speaking to them. So look, I think it's also a freshness as well that probably maybe Rovers needed. Probably needed a bit of a change since the last 3 years, probably haven't gone as well as they would have hoped. So I think Stephanie, brings that bit of freshness. And look, it is an interim post that they've named it as, and whether she goes on to take the full-time job, I don't know. But yeah, look, I think probably learned a lot about players and how to react to losing a game, because I always find, everything's great when you're winning, and then once you lose, all these kind of problems start coming out. So look, we'll see how they react now the weekend, and then we have them the following week in the cup. So we're expecting a really tough game against them.
Yeah, it's a dynamic shift as well for Stephanie when you go from playing along these players pretty recently to now you're, instead of cracking jokes at the back of the line in the warm up, you're in charge, you're the boss. So all that takes a bit of getting used to as well. Um, Speaking of goal scorers, there was a hat trick for Katie McCarn. Bohemians bet the Yellow Waves 5-2. Like Katie was at Shells, Rachel, when she's as a younger player, she came through the ranks. Like, what can you tell us about her and how she's developing at Bowes now?
Yeah, look, I think, she's in such flying form at Bowes at the moment, and sometimes that's all a player needs. He just needs to get a move to a club where they're going to play more. And look, she was great when she was with us. She obviously came through her underage ranks, really shone her, under 17s, under 19s, but was probably just maybe a little bit off at her senior level. And look, she's brilliant in training and stuff like that, but I just think with the quality that we had at the time, it was tougher to get into the team and to get the minutes that she probably needed to really develop. But I think since she's gone to Bow, she's been excellent. Obviously, hat-trick the weekend, and look, the DLR, only off the back of 2 really good results. They've beaten Peamount, beaten Rovers, so it wasn't a case of, this was going to be a really easy game for them. They had to, play well to beat them, and that's what they done. And it was, a lot of Katie's goals are, some of them are great, individual running, beating players. But at the weekend, she goals where she was just in the right place at the right time. And sometimes that's something that's hard to coach or get into a player as well. So it's not about just the amount of goals she's getting, it's all these variety of goals she's getting. But look, she's definitely, improved a whole lot since she's gone to Bowes. She's flying form at the moment. She's still only, I'd say she's probably only 19, is she still at the time now? So, loads of years ahead of her as well. But look, I think it was a great move for her. We obviously all wished her well, and it's great to see her doing well as well. So yeah, I think she's been excellent and definitely one of the best players in the league of the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Hannah Healy made that move as well. It's interesting for anybody who's seen Football Families. The first episode went out last week. Second episode is this Thursday on RTE One. But it's a really interesting insight into life at the Shelbourne Academy, and we see these young players. Hannah was still at Shells at the time. She's one of the players who's tracked, and just the time, the effort, the commitment, and just the overall competition now. Not just at Shelbourne, but it is a unique insight into how tough it is for anybody to break through. I think for a young player just to get out and play is massively important, particularly when you get to that sort of 17, 18, 19 years of age mark.
Yeah, I think so. And look, obviously our expectation as Shells is, we want to win the league. That's our first and foremost. And, look, Hannah was brilliant for us. She was, we played her quite a lot in our team, but I think she was probably, again, similar, someone who just wanted to maybe, get a bit more game time and play with probably maybe less pressure on her shoulders than she would have had when she was with us. But again, like a really good, young player. She's like, I've obviously marked her now that she's moved to Bows, and she's so tough to mark. She has these kind of big long legs that just, seem to be, we used to call her Stretch Armstrong. I don't know, once they used to be able to stretch her legs, we used to call her that, but she just seems to always get her leg in. But yeah, look, again, another player that, obviously we're really upset to lose. We didn't want to go, but sometimes you have to just accept the wishes of the player. And, it turns out it probably was a good move for her. She's flying at the moment, and, is really one of our best players, I would say. So look, it's great to see them do well when they do go. It's obviously a loss for us, and, sometimes they are tough to take, but if you're looking at a bigger picture, sometimes if you're looking at them a person rather than a player, you kind of accept this, this is a good move from them. They might be happier there. And look, it's not to say she'll never come back, or, she's someone who probably might go abroad and be professional. So I just think, what, like you said, while they're young, while they're 17, 18, 19, like, just enjoy your football, be where you are, be where you're going to enjoy playing football, basically.
Yeah. Just a quick word then on the other game the weekend. A good win for Sligo Rovers, 2-0 win at Waterford, and they kind of stopped the rot a little bit. They've been on a run of defeats, but good 3 points for them. Hoist them a little bit up the table. I think that brings them to ninth now. So important to just get a victory under your belt. Not to state the obvious, Rachel, but when you're in that kind of run, I think it was four losses in a row. It's good to go and do it, particularly away from home.
Yeah, I think you're right. And look, like you said about the commitment that players make, and look, it's easy to kind of be committed when things are going well or you have a chance of winning something. But, the players who are down the bottom of the league, they give the same commitment, and it can be really tough when you don't have anything to challenge for. Like you said, losing 4 games in a row. It can be really tough. So, you always have kind of admiration for these players who do it week in, week out, and, I don't have a chance of winning the league or anything like that. But look, I think Sligo was, like you said, it was a great win for them. I think they had 4 losses on the bounce, and Waterford, only a new team in, they were always going to be up and down. They've had some good results, and look, they have some bad results as well. But I think that's the case with any new team that comes in. And I think Sligo are 11th now in the league, and Waterford are just above them. So it was a good 3 points to close the gap on them, try and get as high as possible for Sligo. But yeah, look, Waterford for us this weekend, so they're obviously going to be hurting, and, hopefully they don't have a good bounce back results against us. But look, like I said, I think, a good result for Sligo. It's tough to take when you're losing a lot of your games, but I think when you get a good win like that, you have to enjoy it.
Yeah, and if ever there's an inspiration for the newer teams who've come into the league, it's Athlone. I mean, Athlone entered in 2020, and here they are 5 years later. They've won a league, they've won an FAI Cup, and they're moving well in the Champions League.
Yeah, they've like probably the quickest progression of a team coming in, like brand new coming into a league, I would say. And there's no signs of them kind of slowing down anytime soon as well. All the signs that they're making, and they must have some big budget because they're getting all these great players in. I don't know where they're getting the money, but yeah, look, it's obviously an inspiration for the likes of Waterford coming in. And look, they're obviously a really young team, Waterford. It's going to take a bit of time. It's going to take years, and you have to know that. Look, we're probably not going to be challenging for another couple of years, but if they can slowly build their way up, that's kind of like what Athlone done. They came in and like we're mid-table and just progressively got higher and higher up the league. And I think someone like, Waterford coming in, you're maybe start targeting, the All Ireland Cup, or then you target the FAI Cup, and then eventually you'll build up to a league. But look, like for a new team coming in, they've done well so far. They're not even that they're new, they're so young as well, which is always really tough. But yeah, it's important that you don't ever get kind of too disheartened, and that, it's not too far away where you can find yourself coming up the table with, building, making new signings. You'll eventually start getting players from other teams who want to move. So look, I think like you said, Athlone, a great, example for any new teams coming in.
Waterford are back in action on Tuesday, which is tomorrow as we record this podcast. They're at home to Bowls, and then Bowls on Saturday host Athlone Town. They return to league action, trying to keep up the pace at the top of the table. Sligo Rovers are at home to Cork City on that Saturday. Drogheda United welcome DLR Waves to Limerick. Peamount play Wexford, and Shamrock Rovers play Galway United in the evening game. It is Waterford, as Rachel mentioned there, on the Sunday. Um, Before we wrap up, Rachel, I mean, there's lots of movement and shaking in the transfer window here and across the water. One of the more interesting moves in the last few days has been Izzy Atkinson, who's gone to Sunderland, and an interesting player because she's clearly very well liked by Carla Ward, the Ireland manager. She has a lot of talent. She is left-footed and offers that sort of balance that I think most managers really like in a team. Um, but she's had a difficult year. It just didn't happen for her at Crystal Palace. Having endured a tricky spell at Celtic where she didn't play as much as she would have liked. I think Izzy at this point, I think she might be 23, so we can't keep saying that she's a young player. She's been around for a while. Um, what do you make of this move, and what do you think that she needs to get out of it?
Look, I think it's a good move for her. I think she's had a bit of a tricky kind of time since she's first gone over professionally. She's kind of bounced around a couple of clubs, and I think she went abroad first time in 2021, and this is now her fourth club. So she hasn't ever really kind of found herself settled. And I think, last year was really tough for her at Crystal Palace. I think she only had 2 appearances that totaled 14 minutes in the whole season, which, look, if you're only playing 14 minutes and appearing twice at a club, you're probably at the wrong club. You need a move, and that's obviously what she's gone for. And look, I think sometimes it's going to be a good move for her. I think, the WSL2 is probably the level that she's at the moment and where she needs to be playing. And Sunderland finished seventh last year, so they're probably going to be similar enough this year where there's not the pressure of trying to win a league, and you can just go out, like we were saying, just go out and enjoy your football, get back playing, get back what you're good at. And look, Izzy has great attributes of a player. She's a great left foot. She's so quick, can dribble with the ball, and not a lot of players can do that. And I just think she needs a move at this stage where she's maybe a bit more comfortable, can not under as much pressure to try and get into a starting 11. She can express herself when she does get on. And look, she has other players there now from the Irish squad. Jamie Finn has recently signed, and Grace Maloney's there, Marissa Shiva. And look, even speaking, Jessie Stapleton done a spell at Sunderland, and speaking to her, she loved her time there. She said it was really enjoyable. She said all the people were great. So I think sometimes that's what you need. And even the likes of Jamie Finn coming back from an injury, you just want to be somewhere where you're enjoying playing football. I think that's probably the case for Izzy now as well. And look, if she can get more minutes, she definitely needs more than 14 minutes in the season. So I think for her, it's going to be a good move and just a fresh start, kind of. And hopefully, this is the club now that kind of, like you said, she's 23 now. She needs to start getting settled, needs to start getting more minutes and not bouncing around to different clubs every year.
And Jess Stapleton is probably a good template in terms of somebody that is learning her trade, learning her craft and improving. And we can see that in her performances with Ireland. Okay, she's gone on a couple of loan moves now to Sunderland. Now she's gone to Nottingham Forest, but she has signed a new deal at West Ham. They clearly see her as part of the longer term future there. And she's playing, as you say, it's so important, isn't it? Because you can sense that Carla Ward wants Izzy in this Ireland squad and wants her to be part of her plans, but she's not going to play for Ireland if she's not playing for a club.
No, and look, you can do all the training you want, or even pre-season games. Like, nothing ever replicates a competitive game. And I think for Izzy now, it's time she starts getting that into her. And look, she could be a huge player for us. She's, like I said, had so many good attributes of a player. She's so quick, and sometimes, at that level, that can be half the battle. If you're quicker than if she's playing left wing and she's quicker than the right back, it's you can beat her 9 times out of 10 by just outrunning her. So I think Izzy could be one of them players for us, but I think she just needs to, really get a lot of game time now, really develop as a player. And like I said, you can train all you want, but you only really kind of get better in games and learn about yourself in games. But yeah, look, Jessie Stapleton, a great example. She's obviously on loan again now, again at Notts Forest this year. So look, no ego about her, all like that. It's just where's best for me. She doesn't, going out on loan doesn't bother her at all. And I think Izzy probably, if you're looking at her, take a leaf out of her book, maybe dropping down the level to what you're at and just really, getting a lot of game time, improving as a player, and then potentially in the future maybe going back up to WSL1 for one of the clubs up there.
Yeah, we'll keep a close eye on Izzy's progress on all the Irish players when they return to club action within the next month or so. Of course, Ireland have that big Nations League playoff against Belgium to come in the autumn. Rachel, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us again this week. Thanks also to Alan and to Keith. We will be back again next week, so join us then. Thank you.